All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Bow Hunting Pressured Whitetails. My name is Jake, and we're going to try our best in this episode to give you everything in our pea-sized brains that we can possibly think up of trying to locate and kill bucks in the state of Michigan. This is John. John is my brother, and typically he's on hunting videos and whatnot, but he doesn't always get the chance to get on some of the more reviews and podcast stuff because you live about, a little over an hour away. Yep. And so a little bit of a drive. So we do see each other quite a bit, but we don't always have free time like we do this week because we're actually on family vacation up in Sheboygan. So that's where we be at right now.
Yep.
On the old lake. Going into just a quick rundown, just so you can kind of make sure this is applicable to you or whatever. So Michigan, obviously, everybody talks about, it's the hardest state ever to hunt. And I think it could be, and it also could very well not be, depending on what part of the state you're in. So if you don't know anything about Michigan, it's very similar to other states that span greatly from north to south. Similar to Wisconsin, Minnesota, the UP of Michigan and the northern part is very much big woods, a lot of flat stuff depending on where you're at with a lot of conifers and swamps and stuff like that. But then in other parts of the northern lower peninsula, you got some hills, a lot of oaks, hardwoods, and I'd say hunting really, really, really depends on where you're at in the state. So if you were to kind of draw a line where the rifle zone is at, all of our experience is pretty much south of that. Yep. So that's where we're coming from. And if you hunt north of that, I give you props. You hunt some tough stuff. But all of our stuff is going to be more pertaining to the southern part of the lower peninsula.
We are kind of two different areas a little bit. My area is a lot more swamp and a lot more thickets. I do hunt by my in-laws sometimes, and they have farm country, which I'm limited to boundaries and stuff like that. But yeah, it's pretty typical crop hunting. But the public land that I've been hunting or would like to keep hunting, I've scouted it a lot. Hunted it quite a bit one year, but that area is very thick, and that's actually the kind of hunting areas that I prefer to hunt as thickets and swamps. In areas where you're basically getting away from people pressure. I try to get as far away from the big cities as I can. Yeah, definitely not as good genetics as there are south, like where Jake's hunting. Out by me, I think most 4-year-old bucks are probably in the 120s range, 130s maybe. I've seen some as much as 150, but they're not as common. And there's not as much crop. There is a lot of crop, but it's like the area I'm hunting is all woods and swamp. And it's a big section, and the outskirts of it are crop, but I don't really focus on hunting deer that come off of cropland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then where I hunt, I actually drive a good little ways to get away from the city, get away from the bigger populations of people. I've found that most people they don't want to drive very far. So I do drive a little ways, and I kind of hunt more of the southern part of the lower peninsula. So I got a lot of cropland. The DNR do plant some stuff inside some of the public areas. So there's that, although I don't really target that. There is that. But there's a lot of cropland, all around a lot of these areas that I hunt, obviously on the private, but it does produce a lot bigger deer, there's better genetics down there. I'd say probably a good 4-year-old buck could easily hit 150s very, very easily, I would think.
Yeah, probably easier than out by me.
Mm-hmm, yep. And there's been a lot bigger bucks that have also gone down in the area that I hunt. There's been quite a few 180s. And there's been some 200s, not a lot, but some. Mm-hmm. And so, the bucks do grow a little bit bigger. But as far as the terrain that I hunt, it's like it's really hilly in the areas that I hunt, and I like that because I've grown to learn how to use some of the topography and terrain and stuff, and kind of narrow down where deer travel and whatnot. But there's a lot of hills, and there's really not a lot of swamps. There are some standing water swamps, quote unquote, but a lot of them, it's just a bunch of standing water and dead bushes that grow up in the middle of it. So if you can find a high spot somewhere, you know, in the middle, there might be deer that go out there, but the deer are not going to bed in water typically. And so there's quite a few of those little swampy swales that just kind of don't get used by deer. They'll skirt around them, they'll walk through them, you know, they'll jump into them if they're freaked out and they're trying to get away from danger or something, but they're not always bedding in them. There's a lot of oaks. I do like targeting those kind of, but they're kind of everywhere at the same point. I mean, there's over where John hunts, it's the same deal. Like there's white oaks everywhere. So it can be really difficult to like kind of actually hunt oaks. However, it is really nice to have them. It's just like a little bonus. Like you find a good spot and there's oaks and you're like, sweet. But yeah, I'd say that's pretty much what I'm hunting. But yeah, and then so before we started out kind of getting real aggressive and trying to find big bucks and all this stuff, we were your stereotypical, we have permission to hunt this farm and we hunt only this farm and that is all we hunt, and we have our stands and we go to our stands and we hope that we see big bucks, but we don't really ever move our stands. And
hunt every field corner you can. Yeah, chase the deer around in circles. Well, there's a big buck over on that side today. We'll go over there.
Yep.
Oh, now he's on the other side, you know.
Yep. And it was more of like I hope I kill a big buck. It wasn't ever anything where it was like I'm going to get all these things in my favor and I'm going to go kill that deer. It's more, you just didn't have a lot of control. And part of that was the type of farms that we had that we were hunting, because a lot of it was fields. You had some creek lines, a little bit of woods.
You can only do what you can only do with what you got, you know?
Exactly. And that's what we were doing, is we were just working with what we had, but we were really limited, and we didn't really understand that we didn't really know what we were doing. I mean, at least I didn't. And I think John kind of opened my eyes a little bit more probably sooner because he started getting a little more aggressive with this farm. And I was like, you know, watching these TV shows, and I was like, you can't be walking around looking for stuff. You're getting your scent everywhere. But he was like, yeah, but I found out exactly where this deer is bedded. And I'm like, you know, and it was like, is this weird thing? Because, like, we didn't, you know, we just grew up watching, you know, like the Drurys, and, you know, some of these people are just like
stand sitting and
there's a lot of stand sitting and calling, and we didn't realize how different it was, and we just, you know, I think we just wanted to apply a lot of the same strategies and hope that for the best and hope that it would work, and we didn't realize how different things were and how different we should have been approaching things essentially. But I guess everything kind of flipped on its head for us when we lost permission to the main farm that we were hunting. We had two kind of spots we were hunting. One of them was really nothing but a field, a few trees that you can sit, but there was nothing you can really do with it. You just go out there, you know, every once in a while and sit at the edge of the field. But then the main farm we were hunting, we lost permission. And at this point, I was just like screw it. Like, this sucks. I'm tired of putting all my eggs in this one basket, and then all of a sudden the rugs just pull out from underneath me. You know, I was like, at least with public land, I know that I'm not going to lose it next year, you know? Like, I know.
We're used to people already because the private that we hunted had one person hunting it regularly, and oftentimes you'd have two or even three people out there. So
we didn't even have complete control. So we were kind of already used to some people, and so people didn't scare us too much. It was more so the concept of, oh my gosh, you know, where do I even start? You know, that was the hardest part.
There's no cornfields to hunt on.
Right. I can't sit at the edge of a field. Like, what do I even do? You know, this has been my life, and
we're always
stuck.
Basically, always hunted the food sources, like right on the edge of a field.
Yeah, it's always food sources.
Some sort of travel or food or just find corn, you find deer.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think the first year that we were like, okay, we're gonna get into this public land thing and figure this out. And our strategy was that there was a swamp that was by our house, and we were like, well, we're going to jump in there, we're going to find us a big buck, and we're going to shoot it.
Right.
We're like, there's got to be some big bucks in this swamp, and we're going to find them, we're going to kill them.
We're like, if we're going to go from this nice, easy farmland stuff, if we're going to find a buck on this public, it's got to be hard. So we're going to go for the nasty swamp, which we thought was an overlooked swamp because
Turns out it was actually hunted pretty regularly by a handful of
Yeah,
guys.
I think the only thing we thought about it that was good is there was
There's some big rubs
an
we found.
8 to 10 inch rub that was in there, and honestly, that's probably about as big as the ones that maybe a little bigger than the ones that we had by our house. So we're like, the property that we hunted most, which is by our house, and we're like,
Yeah.
hey, there's big bucks out here too. This is cool.
Right. Yeah. We had really no idea what we were doing. I mean, I remember getting permission on a private little parcel to enter like farther down so we didn't have to walk. And I remember talking to the guy and he was like, yeah, you can park, over in front of my house and walk down my backyard to get down to this public land. And I was all jazzed. I was like, oh, we're going to kill them now. We're going to smoke these big bucks, And I was scouting back there and I remember I came in from this guy's lot and I was back there looking around. All of a sudden I heard this crash, crack, and I was like, there's a big buck coming. So I'm just like hunkered down behind this tree, and all of a sudden there's these two guys walking and stuff, and they're like, man, this looks good, and I'm just like, hello. It was like one of these awkward things, and like they were like super taken back that I was way back there. They're like, man, we can't get away from people to save our butts, And I was like, sorry.
Shucks, I thought I was in a good spot, and they're like,
Yeah.
thought they were in a good spot, and
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we didn't really understand what we were doing necessarily, and we hunted it a little bit,
right.
And we did see some deer.
It was really the only spot we scouted. I think that's where we went real wrong. Is
Yeah.
we thought that, well, we have one spot to hunt. Here that's
we
really
saw
good.
big rubs.
Right.
It's a swamp.
So
That's all we
don't.
need.
We only need one other good spot, to replace the
Right.
one we just lost. And now that's
It wasn't the case at all.
No.
Yep. And then I'd say, so then year 2 of trying to do this public land thing, I'd say we started covering a lot more areas. That was probably the biggest change.
Right. Yep. We're like, well, last year we didn't. This spot didn't work, so we got to find some more spots.
Yep.
Then we put some cameras out.
We put some cameras out.
Yeah.
But
I think cell
we didn't
cams were
really,
even
we
ish
still didn't
thing
really
then.
know what we were doing too much, And yeah, our cameras were not cellular, so we were going in and putting them out and checking them and all that stuff. And I think we were just kind of going off of sign, I'd say mostly, which isn't a bad thing, but like sign, I'm talking like rubs. Like we would go in the spot and be like, whoa, some big rubs, and we're like,
Right.
we're gonna hunt this, and I don't think we really were able to like dissect like, okay, well, why are these rubs here? What time of the year were they probably made? Is the cover even conducive to hold deer in this area? I remember hunting this one spot and it was like all open timber, and I'd seen some big sign in there, but like it could not hold deer, and they were coming off of the neighbors, walking through this field, and they were hanging out in this little piece at night probably, and I just didn't really know what I was doing, I guess. And then year 3 is probably the year that we really started doing a lot more, and we were like, we got a lot more serious with public land. You started going way into scouting.
Right.
I think that was like 2020 or something.
Yeah, I was
that.
the year COVID hit pretty hard, and so I had a lot of time. I followed the government's rules, and mostly because I wanted to go hunting or scouting and find a lot of cool hunting spots, and that's what I did for about a month.
Yeah.
So I just went and scouted a lot of areas.
I covered a lot of areas down by me too, a lot more. I just think at least for me, I wasn't quite to the point where I knew how to narrow down, like, is this a money spot or not? Mm-hmm. But that's okay, because I feel like a lot of times it's just experience. We had to see a lot before we could realize what is okay and what's not okay. And
experience is the best teacher.
Right.
The more experience you can get scouting, hunting, the better hunter you'll be.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's taken away from those 3 years of struggles was just like, you need a lot of spots. If you're going to go into this public land thing and think that you're going to pull a big buck out, like, you got to put in a ton of effort, and you got to go through a ton of spots, and you got to see a lot of stuff. And then you also got to have some experience of hunting that stuff under your belt to start to actually figure it out. Because you can talk about stuff and try to verbally explain things, but like, it's just not that easy. Like, I wish it was, but
yeah, you gotta get your feet dirty, and I don't know if you said this, but not counting on something year after year. Have that in our notes. It's just I found that sometimes sign that's there the previous year is not there the next year or the year after that. It's
Right.
people pressure, it all changes things. And you
Yep.
kind of have yeah, you can recheck in on some spots. They might be good at year after year, but there'll be areas that aren't good year after year, and you'll have to find
Yep.
some new ones. So
Yeah. So I guess our strategies have kind of differed over the years, mostly probably due to the type of terrain that we hunt, because you're hunting a lot of different stuff than me. So
Right.
I'll let you kind of explain your strategy and
Okay.
what you do and how you've been able to get on some really nice bucks in your area, and then I'll kind of go over mine.
Okay, so I'm gonna go off my notes here, but basically it all boils down to finding deer beds. So coming from farmland hunting and stuff like that, where I never knew where deer bedded, basically, and when I slowly started to learn where they bedded, I was able to get a lot closer to them and have a lot more successful hunts. So on public, that was my main strategy, is to find deer beds and find a lot of them. And so I would go into, from an aerial perspective, I'd find some thickets, find some swamp, and just walk it all, like walk it kind of in a grid search way, and mark out all of my all the beds that I would find. And it can be a little confusing when you're in there because you don't know which way north, west, and south is if you're there in the afternoon, and you start walking up onto beds everywhere, and it's kind of disorienting. So I usually have my phone out and I'll mark, oh, this is a doe bed. Here's another doe bed. I'm like, wow, this is a lot of doe beds here. Like, I also would kind of rate the spots. Like, this is a really good bedding area. Like, there's fresh hair here. There's big beds here. Like, this is. And I actually had a little rule of thumb too, where I wouldn't mark a bed if it didn't have a hair in it, just because I needed proof that it was
And this is all like
current
real
bed.
early spring or like
Yeah,
postseason.
this is early spring / like there's a little snow on the ground kind of stuff. Yeah, I would mark out each of the beds, and I'd mark whether they were doe or buck beds. And yeah, I basically found one out of 10 spots that I would scout, I'd find an area that held a good number of deer. And I'd mark down 10 to 20 beds, and out of those 10 to 20 beds, there would be some segregated beds that were buck beds, and basically gave me a really good aerial picture of where the density of deer were, where the bucks were, where the does were, and found a handful of buck beds that I wanted to actually hunt.
Yeah, kind of go into some of the like what was the results of that.
Yeah. Results of that. You want to?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you almost shot a buck
Yep.
off,
Yeah. So.
off of one spot. I stalked a buck that was in a bed you had found.
Yep.
So I mean, like you found the bed, and there
Right.
was the buck in the bed, so it was working.
Postseason, I had time to hunt a spot I wanted to hunt real bad and just didn't get the time to, and had buck bed in it and had a lot of doe beds. Went in, there was literally a buck 138 point that I didn't see, Jake saw, and I could hear him grunting and everything, and I climbed a sapling tree to try to see around and missed a few does, but but yeah, he was in there and he was right where I marked. And so yeah, there was a numerous amount of first sits basically on these spots I'd marked, and they all turned out to be money. I felt like I was a pro or something. I was like, holy cow! Like I mark all these spots out, and here's all these big bucks. Like,
Yeah.
man, if I could do this next year, I'll be killing some big bucks.
Yeah,
Like,
that's kind of like part of the equation too, is like verification on
Right.
your scouting, because like scouting doesn't do you any good
Right.
if what you are hypothesizing isn't actually reality.
right, and that was probably the most eye-opening thing about that year, was just because I had the time, I put in the effort, and I really like dissected basically this entire area out, which is a lot of stuff, and found, out of all of that, the best spots that I felt like were the best, and I narrowed it down and hunted those spots. And yeah, there were a lot of them where I just have some notes here, like treetop cover, like thickets without treetop cover seem to hold a lot of deer, and
No tree stand trees available,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah, basically no tree stand trees available. less hunting pressure, less pressure in general. Like that's a good postseason sit. A lot of times, like that's a area big bucks after gun season are gonna kind of be in when they're still rutting around because they can run around and they're not gonna get shot or seen. And then hard to access spots too. Like if there's no pull off or typically he's gonna receive less pressure, and a lot of times like there's a spot I have like that. I'm kind of excited to hunt. I've only hunted it one time, and I shot a doe, and it was like the last. Yeah, it was late in the year, but yeah, that's an area I plan to hunt a little bit more. But the areas that are overlooked, hard to access, or thick as crap, those are kind of the areas I target.
My strategy, pretty much. I think I started out trying to find buck beds because I got all energized and motivated from John's buck bed success. I was like, I'm gonna do the same thing. So I went down to my areas and I was looking for them. I actually did find a couple real knockout beds, and the thing that just kind of baffled me about them was they were in pretty good spots. Like they were on like a leeward edge, kind of a thick little area overlooking an access path was one of them. And the other one was like at the top of a cut, and they had like a bunch of bat cover to it, and they're very strategic beds. But I went back like the next year, and one of them wasn't there anymore, and it was like it was like a buck that was avoiding gun pressure in like this one area, and so that was a little frustrating. The other frustrating thing was with the beds is they were not in safe areas that I would deem safe, at least. Like the one obviously overlooking the access path. Like how do you hunt that or expect that the deer would be there other than putting a camera right on it and just figuring out like if he is actually using it? I'm not really sure. And so it was just kind of like
some other location,
there was hunters all over that area, but yet I did find a gigantic bed, and that was like way after after season had closed and everything. So I think the deer might have been like kind of moving back into some areas, but still a little spooked by people and whatnot. So I don't know. And I also found that there's just a lot of areas that had some good sign in them, and there were just no beds. Like there was no buck beds. I'd find beds, but like no buck beds. So my strategy ended up being that I was looking at spots where the terrain was coming up like the head of a cut, So if you got these two ridge fingers coming out, well, in between the two ridge fingers, you have a low valley. And that's what I call a cut, and essentially just comes up to the top where the two ridges kind of meet. And the head of that would be a really good spot that I found to catch deer walking that ridge. And so they'd be on the leeward side, the downwind side of the ridge, and they would skirt that cut. And I ended up, I found pretty much some bedding areas on the tops and stuff. And then I would just put my camera right where I thought I would sit, essentially. I was like, this is where they'll walk. I found a scrape or whatever, and I'd put it on that spot. And I was like, this is where I would hunt. Let's see what happens. And I started getting pictures of a lot of deer, and I actually got some real nice bucks that were using the spot. And, and then it took a little bit for me to fine-tune my sitting, my areas that I thought were good. I had to go and sit them a couple times. But I ended up finding some really good spots that way. And my strategy is more based off of trail cams more than anything, I would say. Like I was finding a spot, like a real good bedding area, and then I was putting my camera essentially right on the edge of that bedding area, right where all the traffic would skirt it. And then I was basing if I'm going to go hunt it based off of, have I had pictures recently? And I was just pretty much guessing, like, okay, well, if all of a sudden my camera dries up, I don't get pictures, well, something happened. The deer moved. A hunter came in, left his scent. I don't know, but, I'm not going to
if they were on their regular.
Right.
Otherwise, they could be walking a different trail, but.
Right. But once you fine-tune that spot, and all the deer are going to work past this spot, well, if they're there, they're using the bedding area. If they're not, then they're not. And so I was just kind of doing that and waiting until I saw the activity pick up, and then I was like, all right, time to strike, go in there. And I was just kind of...
You basically did that with the big buck you shot this past year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all based off of what are the cameras saying? Are they saying that the spot's hot?
Right.
Is it was there a big buck that went through recently?
Yeah, like the night before he shot his big buck, we got a picture of the buck, and he was facing the right direction. he was going into the public land, and it was like morning or something like that. Wasn't it like early morning?
Right.
So you knew like he's in there, and time to go in there and find him.
Yeah, so I've been really honing in on trail cameras, and I think, and even this past year, like we just bought a crap ton of trail cameras, and we haven't even gotten them all out. But we've been slowly learning how to use trail cameras more effectively. But that's been kind of my strategy, I guess. But yeah, so kind of going off my trail camera strategy, one of the things I thought would be worth talking about is scent. Because I feel like people don't give, at least how deer use scent in their everyday movements and life, enough credit.
Right.
Everyone wants to talk about scent as far as it pertains to us as hunters and our scent. And while it sucks when you leave your scent out in the woods, and yeah, we stink. We're nasty, stinky people. But everyone's like, eliminate your scent. And I feel like there's this
commercial.
Yeah,
There's new scent products.
There's
everything's scent free.
There's this huge world that the deer live in, revolving around scent that just doesn't even get talked about. But just to briefly touch on it, like we don't really do anything related to scent. Like I sweat like profusely all the time going into spots. So
right, we wear like brand clothes you can get from Myers or Walmart. Like
yeah, my favorite pair of pants was Wrangler ATGs.
Yeah. I hunted with a sweater this past year. I picked up from Myers. That was my favorite hunting sweater.
Yeah. So we just play the wind and stuff. Like we don't really put much effort into trying to get rid of our scent.
Right. The best sits are the first few sits anyways, and
right.
Like you're gonna lay sitting on no matter what you do, and
right. Yeah, we want to talk about how the deer react to our scent.
Yeah, might as well be comfortable.
Yeah. Yep. Because anyway, you could go on a huge video about human scent and everything, but it's been interesting watching, I guess, with trail cameras, like how deer react to human scent. Just like they know you're there. Like if you go into an area that having an idea, like I'm gonna lay down in this buck bed and see what he sees, and then the deer won't really care, and he'll be back in a couple weeks. Like sometimes
there's a spot that I found on commercial forest that just looked like a knockout buck bed, and I was like, it had a pine tree just shredded next to it, and it was just a super like indented like flat area, and he was in a thicket, overlooked thicket, and he was able to see for far ways over top of a thicket over towards parking and stuff. Like it was a pretty knockout looking bed.
Big mature buck probably.
It had hair in it and everything, and I'm like, man, this is good. And I laid down in it, and I was like, man, I'm gonna know everything this buck knows.
I'll see what he sees. I know what he knows.
I'm gonna see what he sees. I'm gonna smell his bed.
Has he pooped here recently?
I don't know. I just had heard things about like lay in their bed, see what they see, and that might work in some circumstances. I feel like where a buck is in an area that he gets bumped out of a lot, but he keeps going back to bed. He's used to human pressure and stuff like that. But in this specific spot, I felt like I was in his secret little bedroom and his like spy point area. And like, if you just imagine being a sniper or something, and the enemy comes and finds out exactly where you're sitting, like you're probably not gonna want to go back there to into position again, because you're gonna be freaked out that somebody's got a beat on you, and I feel like a big buck has some.
Well, he never came back to that bed.
Yeah, I put a trail cam out, and I never got a picture of that buck again, or a big buck in that area, and I'm like,
yeah,
man, like
because he was right there, like he had been using it when you.
It had fresh hair in it and everything.
Unless he died, unless he got hit by a car, which I mean is a possibility, but. More than likely, you laid down so much scent that he was like, peace, dogs.
Right, and
I'm out.
I've even gone back there since then just to see if he picked his bed back up, and I found a little buck skull in the bed. I'm like, some other buck's using it, but didn't go so well for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sometimes you can actually ruin a bedroom by just putting too much scent in, and the best thing you can do when you see a bed or you see a big buck spot is not to walk up to it and lay down in it. It's just to be like, whoa, there it is. Like,
because to think that they come back and they smell everything, and that they smell everything. Like they are going to want to know exactly where did you walk in there, where did you walk around? What were you doing? Where
Right.
did you leave?
And
Like,
it
were you
depends-
just a casual walker by
Right.
and you weren't or were you trying to kill them?
And
Because they'll figure it out.
In this situation, it was early season, so that's probably the worst time, honestly, to be sitting in a
Yeah.
buck's bed because it's a month, 2 months before it's
Mm-hmm.
hunting season. Like if it's more in like late like winter or something like that, like a lot of stuff like all the scent gets washed away. It's probably a little bit of a different story, but you do need to be careful around a big buck's bedroom that you don't freak them out too much. Just being careful with that.
And I think it's even deeper than that because I think like deer they work so much off of their nose, like they as far as not just smelling you, but like smelling other deer. So like a lot of times their travel patterns, like they're walking a trail and using a bedroom and everything because other deer are doing the same thing. So they know if there's other deer using this bedding area, walking this trail, freshening the scrape, well, it's okay.
Yep.
This area is safe.
Right.
All the other deer
You
are
see
doing
that.
it.
You see that all the time too with bucks. You see a big buck and you're like, dang, he's not gonna walk my way, and then some other buck walks right by your stand,
And then here he comes.
and then here he comes. He's like, oh, that's a safe spot to walk by because that little guy made it through. So
Right. And you can observe some of that in the stand, but then also I've observed it a lot on trail cameras too. So like I had a trail camera back behind my house, and unbeknownst to me, it was right over top of a bed, and it turned out to be a buck bed. And the funny thing
lot
is
of buck beds.
that there was a lot of different bucks using it. I think almost every single big buck that I had on camera went and bedded in that bed at some point. And now I went back there and I walked past that bed and I swapped all my cards out of my cameras, and I got pictures of them that night of them going in and they're smelling all around, multiple bucks, different bucks. Every time a new buck would come in, he'd do the same thing. He'd smell all around, but there was never a buck that went and bedded back down in that bed. And it's funny because the progression of how that bed started was it started with a little buck. The little buck bedded down, and he was bedding there. And then eventually he had left enough scent on that bed. Another bigger buck came and was like, I like this bed. And so he like took it over, essentially, asserted his dominance, and was like, I take this bed over in the name of me. And then another bigger buck did it. And eventually it was like the biggest buck of the area was using that bed. And so it's like, I feel like a lot of times they'll bed in spots based off of other deer's scent.
Right. It's not even like, from looking at, I've walked back there before with you and stuff, and I don't remember there being any specific location because of cover or because of this or that they would bed. It's like,
It wasn't
it's
like
just in the woods,
Yeah,
like
it's just on top of a flat.
right. There might be like a small 8-inch log next to it. Pretty small. I don't really know that it was offering much cover. It was more of just a scent and a comfort thing where a deer was like,
I smell other deer.
I smell other deer.
They've been bedding here.
Yep.
And that's the one thing I don't think that people think about is like if you go in an area, you're not just leaving your scent there and spooking the deer, but you got to wait for the deer to come back in, start using the area and leaving their scent back down for other deer to feel comfortable. And
It's like you might be spooking younger deer or leaving your scent down and the younger deer picking up your scent, but like that everything affects everything. Like
right.
Mr. Big is
That's why first sits are so effective.
Right.
Is there's so much deer scent in the area.
Yep.
So a lot of times those big bucks are very comfortable in that
walking
area.
around.
Yep. So when it comes to trail cameras, I guess one of the main things that I like doing is getting them out early, probably like before June, just because that way it gives it time for scent to dissipate off of them and stuff like that. And then by the time the deer start moving well, like that, you get that summer movement, probably like July-ish, then your scent's had a chance to wash off with the rain and all that stuff. And then the big bucks just don't give a rip about if your camera's there or not. And you can get some real good summertime inventory.
Right. I kind of have a different way of. I tend to put trail cameras out sometimes at bad times, and so
He's like, I got to hunt tomorrow. It's about to put a trail camera out.
I just mean like the season's about to open, and I'm like, I want to go put a trail camera out, but
Yeah.
not
like
the
this
best
year.
idea. But I had one camera in a thicket that was more eye level and a little closer to the season. And the first picture I got was a big buck staring at it from like 15, 20 yards away. Never got another picture of that buck.
Dad made a sign that said, screw you, I won't be here.
Right. I mean, I did get a picture of him, but a lot later. And he wasn't in
Yeah,
the
he was
area for
gone
a
after
while.
that first one.
Right. You combine the scent that you leave when you put the camera out and the fact that he can see it and he smells and sees, that puts the two together, and he doesn't want to do a visit there very often. So I tend to put my trail cameras higher in the tree where deer can't smell and won't see, and people won't see them either, and that works for me at least. But
Yeah. My strategy is I like putting them right at eye level. But what I do is I spray paint them all camouflage and stuff, and I put paracord around the tree.
Right. It's
And
all
I let them
taste,
sit
but
out there and get the scent off of them. But
totally
I like
depends where you have it at too. It's
Yeah.
right next to a trail. Is it on the edge of something? Where
Both
deer won't
work.
by? Yeah.
let's see, what else do we have on cameras? Yeah, so as far as where we're putting them in the woods, I feel like guys just like getting pictures of big bucks, and they don't really care or think about where their camera's at and if it's actually going to be helpful to them with the pictures that they're getting. So, like, we used to put them on the edges of a field, and that was cool. We'd get some pictures, but then it got really tricky because you're like, well, where's you bedding?
Like, oh, we got 2 pictures of him. Maybe he'll come out today.
Yeah, and it's like we had absolutely no idea.
It's less
like,
predictable.
All you can see is the direction that he's coming into the camera. So
It's a lot more predictable to get a picture of a deer going into a bedding area, go hunt him that evening.
right,
knowing
because
in the
he's
bedding
probably
area,
using the bedding
than
area.
it is. Yeah, than it is to see and try to think that a deer's coming to a certain feeding
Much
area.
higher odds of him being there. So we both like putting cameras in and around bedding areas, whether it's on the fringes of them or it's right deep in the smack dab middle of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, and that's granted, we're not going in and all the time to check these cameras or
No,
nothing. Like
cellular
they're
cameras,
sitting
yeah.
and they're cellular most of the time. Yeah, so that's pretty much all we got on cameras. We kind of already talked a lot about different camera stuff, but so the other thing I feel like guys really struggle with, and we can struggle with too, and I guess this a lot of times depends on your strategy of gathering intel, and then but it's just like knowing when you strike, like when's the best time to go in there and sit that spot. Like we all know the first sits are the best, right? Like some of your best encounters you've had are on first sits.
Right. I mean, there's always personally, the beds that I find and hunt, I feel like the best times to hunt them are usually pre or post rut, but pretty decently close to the rut. Just because bucks are still in their beds, still using their beds and leaving to locate does, but they're not like on a doe.
Yeah, so time of year for you,
Right.
you'd prefer to hunt some of your spots, probably not peak rut,
No.
but probably when the bucks are more likely to
Right.
be on the beds that you've scouted and targeted.
Yep.
That makes sense. What other stuff as far as like for you, like narrowing down when you're gonna go in there and hunt that spot? Do you want to see trail cam pictures of a buck first?
Right. If I see a pickup of bucks coming in and out, it doesn't
general
even need
deer
to be a
activity.
big buck. If it's just a pickup and you notice there's something going on in the area, good chance there's a hot doe in there. And because you've got 3 little bucks on camera, all of a sudden, that big buck maybe he's just not using that trail, or he's about to jump and kick those little bucks off. Like stuff's going down in the woods. You need to get out there. If you start getting a bunch of pictures and something's changing, that's a
lot of
good
times
sign.
looking at those picture, like when you get those picture bursts, whether it's in the summer or during season, like if you get that, suddenly you have this big old upkick in activity, or you just get a good upkick in activity, like figuring out why. And one of the things you can do is just go look at historical weather, like if you got pictures and be like, okay, well, what was the wind direction? And a lot of times I found there's something that happened. Like sometimes there could have been a complete wind switch, like it was going south all day and then just hit north. And all the deer were like, we're moving or something. And so it could, you could find stuff like that where you're
There's a lot of
realizing that
intel.
there's
A lot of intel you can collect just
Yeah.
looking at the wind direction when a picture was taken.
right. Or if you get a big buck, just knowing what the wind direction
When it was
was.
moving,
Was the air even moving anywhere? Was it just stagnant?
Right, is he on a doe or is it
Was he in a
just
thermal pocket? Like,
bedding?
Yeah. So I think checking historical weather could be huge.
Yep.
And that can help you know when to strike. The other thing, sign. So a lot of times you'll go into a spot and just check it for sign, and sometimes even you'll do that on your first sit.
Right.
Like you'll plan to hunt it regardless.
Say you hunt it in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
you walk into your spot in the dark, and then after you're done with your sit, you walk around, check out a scrape,
Right. If you didn't
just
see
to
anything.
see, yeah, if you didn't see anything, or if you're in an evening, just still hunting your way in or something like that, can be helpful to see some sign.
Yep. Or if you get a massive cold front, obviously that'd be a good time to go sit.
Right.
Or you see stuff and it tips
right.
you off to something. But
Yeah, observation is definitely key as well. If you see something going on in a different area of the woods that you're not in, and it might be a decent time to move. Like being in the woods is when you are hunting, you might as well use all the intel you get while you're hunting to plan your next hunt.
right. I feel like that's the one thing, if not more important than everything else, would be just intel. And that's like almost kind of what we've been trying to say has changed over the years, but it's the kind of intel we're gathering, the speed we're gathering this intel, how fast we're adapting to this intel that we're getting. I think it's just all a matter of like you're not going to kill a big buck if he's not there.
Right. And,
So
talking
trying
about,
to like constantly figure out, is he there or not?
Right.
And then move and then change and adapt until you can find him is like, that's the name of the game. Because what ends up happening, at least a lot of times for me, is if I don't have that intel, I end up just going and hunting spots where I'm like, this is probably a pretty good spot, but I don't have any solid intel. And as like solid intel, I'm talking about pictures of deer using this spot, or bucks in the area,
Right,
or
or
a fresh scrape, or a
observation.
big track. Like I don't actually have intel. I'm just going in there, and I feel like that is the night and day difference between somebody
Killing
that
big bucks.
can kill big bucks every year and somebody that is just going out and hunting. And it sucks because it's like it is nice just to go out and hunt, but a lot of times when we're doing that, we don't have the intel at all, and we're not even in the game.
Right. Yep.
And I've wasted a lot of hunts where I'm just not even in the game at all.
Yep. And
But
talking about intel, that kind of brings us to the next thing we're going to talk about is just being in a deer's world. And one of the things that I was thinking about was just the things you hear when you're in the woods. I'm not talking about like birds and
I heard a
chipmunks
squirrel.
and stuff like that, but talking about like going into your spot early in the morning. There's a lot of times I've heard deer. I mean, how many times? I'm sure everyone has, when they gone into their spot early, has heard deer in the woods walking around. Well, I've heard plenty of times. I've heard the deer walk past, and I can kind of get an idea which direction they're going. And come daylight, they're not around at all. Well, they left before you were there. At least that intel will tell you, because you were listening. They're bedding over this direction, or also staying in your stand after it's dark. That especially near the rut, you'll hear the bucks start grunting. You'll hear them get up out of their bed. You'll hear which direction they're coming from. Say you're hunting a bedding area and you think that's the buck's bedding area. It turns out it's not. It's just a few does that are bedding there, and a buck's coming from a different direction. Well, you can kind of hear them, especially if you sit sit in your stand after dark. I actually had experience with Jake, where basically the neighbors' lights went out. And as soon as they did, the deer just started to talk and walk around everywhere.
yeah, they had
actually,
a light on their pole barn.
Yeah,
is what it was.
And we've actually did an experiment once too at my family's house, and when we were, our parents were gone, and we turned all the lights off because there were some deer in the fields. And next thing you know, all those deer walked across the road and into our yard's ditch.
Yeah.
And they were walking around in our yard, and we're like,
Nah,
let's flick the lights on now. Like,
let's scare 'em.
So yeah, deer kind of sense when people go to sleep, and if you're out there a little later than that, you can kind of get an idea where they're at, and hear them and stuff like that. So
Yep. I would say the other thing is when you go out and you hunt, commit to like gathering as much possible intel as you possibly can. Make it a productive day, because there's been a lot of times where I've just been like, I don't have much time. I'm just gonna race out and get in a tree. And I know a lot of people, that's their only option because of work or whatever. But if you can, I would say like get in early. If you're gonna hunt the morning, get in there, be in your stand like an hour before daylight, because it gives everything time to calm down. You get more intel. It's just all intel based. And if you have a whole day to hunt the morning and the evening, because a lot of times if a deer hasn't came through in the morning, he might come through in the evening. So you get a double shot at him before he comes in and smells your access path and all that, because that is the one thing that is inevitable, is that the deer will come in and they'll smell that you were there. But a lot of times you can get 1, 2, 3 sits in before the deer that is your target deer makes it in there. So like when you go in and you're gonna target a spot, sometimes even hunt sitting it 3 times before you let it cool off is just a really good idea.
Right. Typically, your first sit's your best sit, though.
Yeah, a lot of times it's your first.
You can ruin it by your third sit, especially if you shoot a doe or something like that. But your fresh sits, I guess you can call it, are definitely your best sits.
Right. But don't give up if you don't see him your first sit. Like, you might have got busted by a doe, but, like, go back in there and give it another try.
It can be time of year, too. You know, it just depends on your intel.
Yep. I think that's all of it.
Yeah, so when it really comes down to it, I guess it's just a matter of how much hard work do you put in.
Yeah, how much intel can you gather.
How much intel can you gather in the year, and
that's what really sets it apart too, because like I get pictures of guys on my trail cameras like that are on public and whatnot, and I think a lot of people would get a picture of somebody on their trail camera and be like, "Oh man, I thought my spot was secret, but it's not, man. This sucks. I gotta go deeper," and it's not that at all. And because if you're hunting public, like there's gonna be guys that come in and out, and it's not necessarily that you have to have a spot that no one has ever touched, because I feel like that is the mentality of some people. And at least here in Michigan, like, good luck. Like, good luck finding a spot that nobody touches that's on public. Because people walk everywhere.
Honestly, I don't think there is. Yeah, there isn't a single spot I know of that isn't touched by hunting pressure. Right. It's just a matter of, like,
but just because they go there and they walk through, that doesn't mean that they all of a sudden know everything there's to know about that spot. And that's the one thing that intel gives you a leg up, is if you have the intel and you know what the deer are doing, the deer will adapt to people, like they'll be back. They're not going to just go underground because somebody walked through there. They've been living in this woods, and they understand that people will take, everyone kind of takes the same route of travel a lot of times. So they know, they're familiar with human scent being in certain areas, stuff like that. But if you can get the intel where it's like, when that big buck is in the area, it's like, then it's like, that is the make or break it ticket, whether it's because of a track, or all of a sudden scrapes just start getting ripped up, or a rub line breaks out, or you get a trail camera picture. But at least in Michigan, where we're hunting, that seems to be the ticket.
You want to share any stories or anything like that you can think of?
I mean,
maybe it would help.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories that you'll be able to watch this year as far as that, because that's pretty much exactly what happened. But the 2 bucks that we got killed this year was just because of intel. The 1 buck John killed was because all of a sudden I had a trail camera on the fringe of a bedding area that just lit up, and it was like the first week of November, and all of a sudden,
right, there's probably a doe in the area or something.
Yeah, like we got a real respectable buck on camera that night, and a few smaller bucks hitting the scrape. So I was like, all right, something's going on. So we went in there that morning, lots of activity, and he shot his buck. And my buck was because I had a trail camera in this one spot, and I knew all these deer that were going to this bedding area, they were going to cross this little area, and I got a picture of the buck, went in there and shot him. So
yep. And you went in early so you could hear the deer roaming around with a doe, grotting, and
I listened to him for like an hour.
Right, got an idea where he was before you could even see him. So that helped. To basically, he basically stood off into an observation point where you could hear and see, but you couldn't kill.
Right.
And then moved in from there as the day approached. So.
Right. It's pretty much just a race for intel is all it is,
Right.
The more intel you can get, the better. And the more spots you get intel on, the better.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking about an example of like, scrape hunting and stuff like that. There was one time where I followed some scrapes back with a guy that was helping set up a tree stand, and kind of followed it back towards a swamp that wasn't as hunted and wasn't as good of a huntable swamp. There was only like 2 to 3 areas deer actually could bed in it, and we followed it back there, and I cut a pretty big buck track, and I was just thinking, man, this is where he's coming out at. So sometimes just doing a little intel a little scouting in the middle of the season. When you're out there, especially if it's a spot that you don't have pegged down. Like
Yeah.
if you're, this is a spot I didn't have pegged down. I was like, I studied the swamp. I knew where the deer could bed. There was average sign. I wasn't going to go in there and just hunt it blind one day because I didn't have that much sign. I didn't have a camera out there, nothing. But so backtracking that sign kind of just helped me verify there is something in there actually. And I would never have known otherwise.
Yeah, that's huge because I feel like before I used to almost have a fear where it's like I would make up this situation in my head of this spot that I thought I told myself I had it figured out, and I was like, well, all I got to do now is I got to get in there undetected and I got to
Right.
sit it. And
Yeah, I think that's a
you'd be too afraid to walk around.
Right.
You'd be too
That's
afraid
like one
to
of those.
try to figure it out.
I think that's one of those weaknesses of a lot of hunters is they make up hypothetical situations in their mind where they're like, I think the deer is bedding
Right.
here, and they just don't have enough.
And then
evidence.
if it doesn't work out like they had set up in their head, then they're like, well, public land just sucks.
right? They don't have the intel and they go off of a hypothetical situation they create in their mind that, in all decency, maybe makes sense to them, but they're not out there like a deer is to see that 4 other hunters just walked that piece,
Yeah.
And they don't got the intel, so they're hunting off of a topographic image, or
Like if you lived out there in those woods with those deer, like you'd start to learn
right,
a lot
more
really
than
fast.
you'd know hunting pressure a lot better. You know where people walk, what they think.
Yeah, you know what how the deer are reacting to the people that are coming in. You know how they're avoiding them, how they're skirting them. You'd learn why they're bedding, where they're bedding, to try to stay safe. There's so much you would learn, but I think the downfall is when you just jump into a spot real quick and throw a stand up, and then expect to be able to have the success that you have conjured up in your brain, and it's just
Yeah, it's good to have the intel.
Yep.
That's
And
why you
it's
gotta
not-
scout.
Yeah, and just because you scout doesn't mean that you're going to get the perfect spot either. Like, how many spots did we hit this year when we took a scouting vacation? Like, we scouted for 3 days at least.
Right. It was kind of right before all the leaves were starting. Well,
Yeah.
before they
it wasn't
were
the
getting
best time to
full,
scout,
right.
but it was. I mean, we still put in a ton of miles.
It was
and-
still difficult, like really difficult to find. Yeah, it was kind of the wrong time of year, I feel like, but it was
Yeah.
it was pretty difficult to find good spots and good intel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of hard to know if that stuff's going to pay off either, because
Yeah.
well, it might be in the season that it actually pays off, and
Right.
and
And there
not
could have been
early
some
season.
spots that we found that we kind of wrote off in our heads that might
been
actually
better.
be good.
right,
And that's just the name of the game. It's like
right,
work harder than the next guy.
yep. And unfortunately, some people, you just gotta enjoy the hunt. You gotta enjoy the experience, and it's not all about killing big bucks, but you love killing them.
Right.
Just you don't have the time for it. You do your best, and that's the best that you can do, and
Right.
you don't have to worry about comparing yourself to some other hunter that's professional,
Right.
and they just have the time to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
I mean, we live in Michigan, so it's
Right.
Iowa. It's not Kansas.
no,
Like,
it's not easy to just go out and kill a big buck.
No, and you just have to have realistic expectations. Like,
Right.
you can kill big bucks just about anywhere, but like what you have to sacrifice in each of those situations varies greatly. Like you might not have to sacrifice a whole lot if you live, in a great big buck state, but here in Michigan, I mean, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of the sacrifice that it takes as far as time, scouting, cameras, like all that stuff to get on something, and it's really difficult, and it takes a long time. And just because we killed 2 nice bucks last year doesn't mean it's going to
We'll do it
happen this
again.
year.
Right. It could be a
So-
total dud in comparison, and I'm
Yep.
hoping it's not gonna be that. But yeah, like the spot we're only putting a week in, so
Yeah.
in a good time. But like
Yep.
you're gonna have to, and we also have a lot of intel from last year hunting, which could
Right.
turn out to be duds too. It's kind of, yeah, we're gonna play it by ear, I guess, and see what
Yeah.
happens. But
It's only like our second year doing this trip down in that area. So
yep, it definitely has better genetics than my area, which is why I like going there, just because when you get a picture of a buck, it's a bigger caliber deer than
Right.
when I get a picture of a buck. So
we see bucks crossing the roads, and our minds are like,
right, it's a little bit like going to some other state,
different state.
little bit,
Yeah.
in the evenings and in the mornings, like you're driving to your spot and you have a 140 cross the road in front of you. It's like yeah, I'm in the right, Michigan County
Right.
area
Decent
for
spot.
hunting. There's big bucks running around, and you got a chance. So
Yep. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful to you in some way, shape, or form. It's super hard to try to like take 5 years of trial and error and boil it down and try to come up with something that makes sense to you guys. But all I can say is I think one thing honestly that helped me maybe more than anything is just that I kind of did a career change around the same time I started hunting public, where I had more of a physically easy job. I was just editing videos, and then I went from that and I worked at a factory, which was a pretty physically easy job. Then I went from that and I started flipping houses with my brothers and stuff, and then that was like way harder. So like the physical exertion went through the roof, but at the same time I almost conditioned my body and my mind to like where I'm like, I'm gonna be uncomfortable today. Like I'm gonna be sweaty, I'm gonna be stinky, I might hurt myself.
what you did?
And but I don't really care, and that's what's going to happen today is I'm going to work my hardest,
Right,
and
fine.
then I'm going to go home and take a shower and go to bed. And
Right.
like I got into that mindset of being uncomfortable and putting in an
Right.
astronomical
I
amount
guess
of
that's-
physical work.
Something we didn't really even talk about, but like I've tried walking through some thickets with my wife, and it doesn't work. She'll
No.
never go back again because it's
Yeah.
it's miserable. I actually just got out of a swamp,
Yeah.
and I did a really bad thing. I walked in to a swamp just recently looking for early season sign because there was early season rubs all over the place last year in beds, and walked in this year to find that somebody had already put a trail camera out in a deer stand, and the sign was not there, and had shorts on, and I came out and my
Problem
legs were
number one.
literally burning red, and they had scratches all over them,
Yep.
and I had walked through poison ivy everywhere, but
A lot of times when I walk through
I was
stuff too, I
driven.
take I wear gaiters,
Right.
so from my knees down is okay, but from
I
my
was just
knees
being
up,
stupid, but-
from my knees up, a lot of times it's just peppered with little blood spots just from briars and stuff.
You
It's
get
like,
burrs all over you. It's really uncomfortable, and you have to be willing
it
to walk
sucks.
through. You have to be willing to sometimes crawl through things, actually. And it's really about grid searching. Like you can't overlook something, or you might have a big buck bed there too. Like you kind of have to cover the area pretty well. So
which
sometimes
is it's a cool separator, because for the guys that are okay with that amount of uncomfortableness and that amount of work, well, there's the reward for it,
Right.
But it also keeps some of the other guys out of areas just because of how sucky it is. So, which isn't always bad either. But it's one of those things. You work hard enough for it, and eventually,
Yep.
you get your reward. But it's gonna take a lot.
yeah.
But yeah, so that's pretty much all we got for this episode. I'm pretty sure that Matthew's doe kill will probably be airing next, I'm assuming, because Youth Hunt was this past weekend, so we couldn't get anybody out. But we'll be airing Matt's doe kill from last year, so that was pretty cool. And then just start rolling the videos. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.